Megan, you ready to go?
I am. Well, good afternoon. We are so happy that you guys are here. To introduce who we are, my name is Megan Sanders, and I'm your Training and Evaluation Specialist. And the lady who is joining me is Christina Henning. She's the Director of Statewide Services. We are Partners Resource Network, and we are a nonprofit agency that operates the Texas statewide network of parent training and information centers. PTIs are funded by the U.S. Department of Education, the Office of Special Education Programs, or known as OSEP. Our PTI projects are PATH, 10, and TEAM, and the Texas PTIs provide training, education, information referral, emotional support, and individual assistance in obtaining appropriate services. We are extremely excited today and to be back in the swing of things, and we are thankful for the opportunity to team up with our Ohio PTI for our webinar today. I am going to pass the mic over to Ms. Marcy Beers. She is the Executive Director of the Ohio Coalition for the Education of Children with Disabilities, and she'll be able to tell you a little bit about who they are and what they do. Welcome, Ms. Marcy.
Hi, thank you, Megan. The Ohio Coalition for the Education of Children with Disabilities is the Parent Training Information Center for the state. We are statewide, and we are a nonprofit organization. We are dedicated to advancing the educational interests of children with disabilities. We serve all 88 counties, and the mission of the coalition is to endorse and promote efforts to provide appropriate quality education for children and youth with disabilities. And we do so in the belief that all children have a right to a meaningful and relevant education. We are so very pleased to be part of this collaborative effort with the Partners Resource Network. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Marcy. All right. Kristin, are you about ready to get started?
Kristin, I have you unmuted now.
Okay, I'm here.
All right, well, I will get you introduced. I just wanted to make sure that you were ready. Our first speaker today is Ms. Kristin Hildebrant. She's presenting Negotiation Skills for Parents, How to Get Special Education Services for Your Child with Disabilities. Kristin is a senior attorney at Disability Rights Ohio, Ohio's protection and advocacy agency for people with disabilities. Kristin has practiced in the area of disability and special education law for 29 years and manages the special education team at Disability Rights, where she represents children and parents in special education cases. Kristin is a frequent speaker on the topic of special education, juvenile justice, the school-to-prison pipeline, and disability law. She received her law degree from the Ohio State University Moritz College of Law. And Kristin, if you are ready, I will pass the mic over to you.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I appreciate being invited to present on this topic today. I know we're going to have some time to take questions after I'm done, but I just wanted to show you that my contact information is available on this presentation. I'm happy to try to answer anybody's questions or provide support to people outside of this webinar, so my contact information is there. The best way to reach me is through my email, but phone works as well. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Disability Rights Ohio. We are the state's protection and advocacy agency for people with disabilities. Every state has an agency like ours, and we're charged with advocating for the rights of people with disabilities. What I do at the office is assist families and children with disabilities to access appropriate educational services. So for many years, I've been involved in the IEP process and the negotiation skills that it takes to get the appropriate services through the team process. So that's what I'm going to be presenting on today. Much of the information that I'm going to be covering is available in a publication that our office has on its website called Negotiation Skills for Parents, How to Get the Special Education Your Child with Disabilities Needs. The information in this booklet is really focused on working through the IEP process or a meeting for a child who has a 504 plan. But many of the tips are helpful and appropriate to use in any kind of team process. So if you as a parent are involved in discussing your child's needs in other venues, these kinds of tips are very helpful anytime you're talking to a group of people about what services your child needs and how to best get those. So what we're going to cover today are the bullet points on this slide. We're going to talk about how do you get prepared to negotiate or advocate for your child in a meeting setting. Different types of effective communication, because how you communicate really should be different depending on the circumstances. How do you get good results at meetings? Identifying any barriers you might have to success. So trying to figure those out before you go into a meeting is really helpful in getting good results. We're also going to talk about how to respond to problems, maybe problems that the team is having or problems that you're having. What is the best way to do that? And then finally, while the focus of this presentation is going to be on getting what you want in a meeting setting, sometimes you can't do that. So we'll briefly discuss what are some of the remedies that are available to families if they can't get what they want at the IEP team meeting. And just one caveat for people who are listening, because I know we have people from different states. Most of what I'm talking about is universal. The publication that we have, though, has some things that are specific to Ohio, generally in the last part of the presentation about remedies. So I'll try to make that as general as possible so it applies to the most people listening. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is getting prepared. So really, it's very important to work into getting prepared before you go to an IEP meeting or any school meeting, really, as the parent of a student with disabilities. So I've been doing this for a long time, and it's the parents who are prepared who are more likely to get what they want at the lowest possible level of this process. Additionally, if you are prepared, if you have identified the issues, if you understand some of the law or the standards that apply, and you know what you want, then the school is going to take you more seriously because they will see you as a parent who's done some research, who's educated themselves, and significantly, if you come in with a proposed solution to the problem, that can get you a long way. What I've found in doing this work for a long time is that one of the reasons teams don't come to an agreement is because they've been unable to identify a solution that works for all parties involved. So to the extent that you can go in as a parent proposing what you think is a good solution, what works for you, you are going to be ahead of those parents who go in and aren't able to articulate what their child needs or what in particular they want the school to do for the child. So we're going to talk about getting prepared to do just that. And we're going to review the 4 steps that we think are critical to preparing to negotiate or advocate in an IEP meeting. First, you need to identify what the problem is. You need to try to identify a resolution to that problem. Certainly, you need to identify what you as a parent want or what your student, your child wants, if they're old enough to articulate that and participate in the process. You need to make sure you're communicating with the right person throughout this process, and depending on what you're asking for, that person will be different. And you need to find out who has the information you need to find out what's going on and what the possible resolution to that problem would be. So we'll kind of go through these 4 steps in the preparation process. So first one is identify the problem and the solution. So just like when you are trying to develop an appropriate goal for a child or a behavior plan for a child, you need to figure out what is the problem you're trying to solve, right? So that's true in the IEP meeting or 504 meeting process. The first step in solving a problem is clearly identifying what that problem is, right? What complicates the issue a little bit in special education is that sometimes there are multiple perspectives in the IEP meeting about what that problem is, right? And that's understandable because parents are in the position of wanting the best possible education for their child. And the school district is in the position of trying to provide an appropriate education to the child under the any kind of budgetary restraints or other kinds of restraints in the district. So sometimes the perspectives are different, but it's important to clearly figure out what the various perspectives are, right? You can also have more than just a parent and the school perspective. You can have a perspective that isn't the same as the perspective of the teacher, for example, or an aide working with the child. So the first step is really figuring out where are people, how are they feeling about the issue, what actually is the issue, and how are people seeing it from the unique position there is, right? So once you can do that, then you can identify possible solutions to the problem. There are almost always multiple solutions to every problem. And the key to coming to consensus in the meeting process is to try to find a solution that everyone can live with, right? The simple solution is always the better solution because it's the easiest to implement. But keep in mind that there may be more than one way to fix the issue, and to the extent that you as a parent or an advocate can accept the position of the school district, it's more likely that it's going to be implemented. Because generally speaking, the school district will propose a solution that works within their existing program or any constraints that they're under, right? So if that works for the child, great. If you can agree with whatever the school is proposing and you think that's appropriate for your child, that's clearly the most effective and easiest way to resolve the dispute. Okay? So the next thing you want to do is make sure that you're communicating with the right person, and there's different things you have to think about. First, you have to know who has the authority to fix your problem. Okay, so IEP meetings and 504 meetings are comprised of a variety of different kinds of people. Sometimes all of the appropriate people are at the IEP meeting, and sometimes they are not, right? So the first thing to figure out is who is the person that you need to talk to resolve your dispute. You also want to find a person with whom you have established a good relationship if possible. Certainly, like everything in life, if you have a good relationship with city personnel, it's going to be more likely that they're going to respond to you in a positive way and try to respond to your reasonable request. You also want to ensure that there will be follow-up to your request and that people are going to, the school is going to resolve your request in a timely way, right? That there's some kind of timeline set out to ensure follow-through so that whatever was agreed upon actually gets done. Okay? So communicating with the right person. It's always best to try to communicate at the lowest possible level, right? So if your issue is a simple classroom-based issue, then it makes perfect sense to contact your child's teacher and resolve that issue with the teacher. So an example might be if you were expecting that your child was going to have homework and you don't see any homework coming home. right? The way to address that issue is to communicate with the teacher, the one responsible for giving the homework, and it might be just a simple communication error, or your child's doing homework in the classroom because they're getting ahead in their work. Whatever it might be, communicating with the teacher is the appropriate way to get those kind of simple issues resolved. Okay? If the issue relates to a building level problem, like there's a problem with transportation, for example, or some kind of more building-wide issue or service, then the principal would be the appropriate person to contact. If your issue is more of a district-wide issue, or it's clearly a special education issue or dispute, then it's appropriate to go directly to the special education administrator in your school district. They're the person who would understand the special education program and the services available, and would be best suited to resolve the dispute. If it's a much bigger issue, or you've worked your way through this communication tier system, and you haven't been able to resolve your dispute, then it might be appropriate to take your dispute to the superintendent. One thing that I've found in my many years of working in this area is that superintendents, generally speaking, do not know what's going on at the lower levels. They are really looking at district-wide issues and not focused on individual child issues. So it can be a two-edged sword sometimes. The superintendent may not have any idea what's going on, or they might be able to help you resolve your dispute if you bring it to their attention. Right? So you just need to assess what is your issue and try to work through this sort of continuum of ways to communicate with people to get it resolved. All right, so the next thing you want to consider is how can you effectively communicate with people, right? That involves a variety of different things to consider. We already talked about trying to resolve your problem at the lowest level, work your way up to the chain if you don't get results in the lower levels, but you can increase the likelihood that you're going to get results from the people you communicate with if you communicate with them effectively. And one of the ways to do that, of course, is to establish a good rapport with the people that you're going to be communicating with. So I always encourage parents to get to know their children's teachers. To the extent that you can do anything to get yourself involved in the classroom, that can be helpful. So you might want to volunteer in the child's classroom, get to know your child's teachers, offer to do something to help the teacher, whatever you think might help you establish a relationship with that person. Okay? So you also want to try to establish regular ways of communicating with people. And the way to do that is to ask people how they prefer to communicate, right? So teachers are busy. Most people in the school setting are busy. So the best thing to do is to go in and introduce yourself, try to establish some rapport, and say that you would like to have a way to regularly communicate with the teacher about how your child's doing in the classroom, or how you can communicate any kinds of concerns you might have or questions that you might have. Okay? So some parents will establish a communication notebook, for example, particularly for kids who have more significant disabilities or kids who are not able to communicate well themselves. It's often a good thing to do to ask the teacher if they would be willing to have a communication notebook that goes home with the child every day in the child's backpack. The teacher or the child's aide or somebody else in the classroom can write a little note about how the child did, if there were any concerns or unusual behaviors, and then the parent can see that and know what the day was like, and be prepared to expect any issues that might happen at home. Similarly, the parent can explain to the teacher, for example, if the child has a bad night or couldn't sleep, to expect that the child might be not on task or maybe have more behaviors than usual because they didn't sleep well that night, right? So whatever the issue is for the child, that's a great way for parents and teachers to communicate. Sometimes teachers don't want to do that because they don't have the time. So you could also establish maybe a weekly email, for example, that goes from the teacher to the parent, explaining how the week went, and then the parent can respond. So that's a great way to establish that kind of regular communication with your child's teacher. All right. So the other thing you want to know, what you want to do is decide what is the best way to communicate with people. In my opinion, especially early on in establishing this relationship, personal contact is the best. Because there are some things you can get out of personal contact that you can't get out of written contact or telephone contact, right? It allows you to gauge a person's body language and their demeanor. And that's a way for you to assess how people are responding to your request, and how they might be feeling about a particular issue. Right? It's also another way to establish good rapport with people. If they see that you are going out of your way to come to the school and talk to them in person about issues, they may perceive you as an involved parent, which most people see as a positive thing, involved in your child's life, willing to be an active member of the team. And I think a lot of teachers appreciate that. So, but you just sort of have to talk with the teacher or whoever it is in the school that you're communicating with, if that's okay with them, if that's something that they prefer. And if they don't, consider other ways to communicate. I think one of the things that will make you an effective advocate for your child is communicating with people to the extent that you can in the way that they want to communicate, because that makes them feel more comfortable and open and more effective, and it establishes more effective contact or communication. Someone isn't comfortable with that kind of personal communication all the time. Of course, telephone communication can be just as effective, especially if you're just trying to resolve a simple issue or communicate a simple message to the person you're talking to. It's also very helpful if your time is limited or the teacher's time is limited. And if your issue doesn't rise to a level that's complex, that would be difficult to document to a letter or something, then it's certainly good to just pick up the phone and talk to the person that way. Okay. There are some circumstances, though, where written communication really is the most effective means of communication. And if you're making a specific request to the school district and you need to establish a record of your request and a timeline of your request. So many of those things in special education have timelines associated with them. So for example, if you're just new to this process and you are trying to get your child qualified as a child with a disability eligible for special education, you would certainly want to make that request in writing, because the written request establishes a timeline for your request and a record that you actually made it. I have a lot of parents that call me and say, I asked the school to evaluate my child, and there was never any record made of it because the parent made the request over the telephone or just in person when they were there, when the school picking up their child. So if that's what you're asking for, and if it's necessary to establish a timeline and a record, you should make that request in writing. Also, it sometimes makes it more likely that you will receive a response if you put your request in writing, because the school district also understands that that was a formal request. It is documented in paper, and you can later say that you made that request because you have a copy of it, right? So it's important to know when it is that you need to put things in writing. Our website has a nice selection of sample letters for making requests, different kinds of requests of your school district, and certainly they're not specific to Ohio, so you can look at those templates. I know there's also a lot of other templates available out there on the internet, so that's a good way to get started if you're just not sure how to put something that you're asking for in writing. Right. So it's important that you document all communications. Certainly, if you send a letter to the school district, it's documented and it's in writing, assuming that you actually kept a copy of it. So it's critical that any time that you send a letter, that you keep a copy of it. The other thing that's critical is that you date it. I've had a lot of cases where I have looked at educational records for a child, and there are a lot of letters that are sent or communication goes back and forth that doesn't have dates. Dates are critical, again, for establishing timelines. So make sure if you send a letter or any kind of communication to the school district that you have dated that, all right? Another great thing to do is to keep a notebook or some type of written log of any kind of communications that you have with your school district. You can get just a spiral notebook, or you can keep an electronic documentation of your discussion. But it's really helpful to write down the date. You can just say date, phone call to so-and-so in the school district, and just a brief description of what you talked about and the summary of the discussion, what you asked for, what the person you talked to agreed to do or didn't agree to do. That is not only helpful for you to use as an advocacy tool in moving discussions along for your child, but if you are unable to resolve your dispute, the team process, and you have to use one of the remedies that's available to you, it's critical to have that kind of documentation of the timeline, the requests that you made, the responses that you received from the school district. Okay? And then keep copies of anything that you get from your school district and anything that you sent to them. A lot of the parents that I talk to keep notebooks where they organize their child's educational records, and so they have a section for records, they have a section for correspondence, they have a section for any kind of notes, or a communication log. So to the extent that you can be that organized, it's going to be great in helping you be an effective communicator throughout your child's education career. Some other things to keep in mind are don't communicate when you're angry. These meetings can be very emotional. Often you as a parent are one person in a room of a lot of people, so it can be intimidating. And also often you are in that room talking about either problems that you are having or needs that your child has. And it can be difficult to listen to that, especially coming from a room full of people when you are there by yourself or maybe there with one other person. So it can be emotional, you can get angry. So it's important to make sure that you, whatever time you need to cool off before any kind of communication. A lot of parents that I represent have had a history of difficulty with their school district, so there's a lot of baggage, so to speak, that they are carrying where they think the school district hasn't adequately supported their child. So that can affect the way in which they communicate. So a good rule of thumb is to take some time to cool off before making a phone call or writing a letter or email to a school district. I say this for a couple of reasons. One is sending an angry email or letter or making an angry phone call is not going to help you get what you want for your child. You know, the better your relationship with the school district, the more they see you as a positive influence, the more likely it is they're going to want to work with you and get you what you want, right? So the other reason not to do it is that angry communications can be used against you later. They are documented forever, and they can be used against you. So if you end up in a due process hearing for school district, you better believe that those angry letters that were sent are going to be used in that hearing to portray you as an angry parent and try to turn the hearing officer's opinion against you. So really critical to make sure that you you step back before you send a letter, and that if you write an email while you're angry, don't send it until you've had a chance to pull off and reread it and think about whether or not you want that documented forever. Okay? So being prepared is the best way to get good results at the meeting. I talked to you about that a little bit already, but there's some things that you need to know before you go in, right? So we talked about understanding what the issue is. We've already talked about that. You need to identify the issue. You need to know who to talk to get your issue resolved. But there are also some other things that you need to know, and these are sort of more legally based or standards-based things, right? There are also things related to personalities of people and the strengths of your team. So you need to know the strengths of your position. Are you asking for something that you're entitled to? You need to understand the laws and standards that apply, because in the educational setting, particularly for kids with disabilities, there can be a tension between what the educational law requires and what your private providers, for example, have suggested your child needs, and we'll talk about that a little bit more thoroughly. You've already said, what you want. That's always important. You want to know the strengths of your team. Right? So the IEP and the 504 team are made up of multiple people, and we'll talk a little bit about how do you identify whether you've got a good team or a team that needs some support, and that you also need to be prepared to think outside the box, because, as I said before, there are almost always multiple ways to resolve an issue. Every school district is different. Every teacher working with a child is different. And you need to figure out a way to resolve the issue that is going to work for the particular folks on your team. All right, so know the strength of your position. Okay? So you can access people like me, special education advocates. Texas has a protection and advocacy agency, and I'm guessing that they do some special education work. Certainly the PTI can help, and other education advocates in your state can help you understand whether what you're asking for is something that you're entitled to. You can also seek the assistance of an expert, someone who understands the particular issue that you're dealing with. So, for example, if you are looking for if you have a child who is having difficulty reading, and you're looking for a particular program that's going to help your child read, you might seek the assistance of an expert in reading. Or you have a child who is exhibiting behaviors in school, and the school is having a difficult time managing those behaviors, you would seek the assistance of a behavior expert, for example. And you can use that person outside of the meeting process to educate yourself about what might be a good recommendation for services for your child, or what they think your child might need. You can also have that person participate in your meeting. So if you are asking for a particular thing from the district and the expert supports that position, certainly if you can have that expert attend the meeting, it's going to be more likely that you'll get what you want. Sometimes you can get an expert at the school district's expense if that is appropriate. There is in special education the ability to get let me go back here. Something called an independent educational evaluation at the school district's expense. That's where you are seeking a second opinion. You disagree with an evaluation that the school district has conducted. That your school district policies around that might be different. Certainly there may be some difference between your district and the district here in Ohio. But if that's something that you think would be helpful to getting your issue resolved, you should ask the district for a copy of their policy on the independent educational evaluation and see if that's something that might help your team. One thing to keep in mind in this regard is that to the extent that you can get somebody that the school district thinks is professionally honest and good at what they do, it's more likely that you're going to have the school district agree with what the expert is suggesting and implement their recommendation. If you go out and you get somebody that you like, but you know the school district doesn't like, for example, it's not going to be helpful in helping the team resolve the issue because the school district is more likely to disregard what that person is saying because they don't like that person for some reason or they've heard bad reports about that person. So it's always good to try to work it out with the school district who that person is going to be and get some agreement that everybody will find that person's input helpful in the process. The other thing that you need to do is know the legal standards that apply to what it is you're asking for, right? So you want to advocate always for what your child is entitled to under the law. You want to use appropriate language, and you want to make sure that you understand the correct standards that you are working under so that you appear to be an educated about what you're advocating for, and you're not putting yourself in a position of the response being, we don't have to do that because that's not what the law requires. Okay? So another good thing is to be prepared with some suggestions going in to any meeting that you're attending. So certainly that requires that you know what you want before you go to the meeting. I suggest to a lot of parents to draft a proposal that they can share with the team if that would be appropriate. You also need to know what you can give up and what is a deal breaker before going into an IEP meeting, right? So it requires a lot of preparation before the meeting actually occurs so that you're in the best position to advocate for what you want, okay? So another thing that you need to do is understand what the purpose of the meeting is going to be. In special education law, school districts are required to send notices to parents whenever there's going to be a meeting. That notice will explain the general purpose of the meeting and who's going to be attending the meeting, but I always suggest to parents that they contact their special education administrator to get a more thorough understanding of what the purpose of the meeting is if they don't get that understanding from the notice that's sent by the school district. So that's always something you can do, send an email or pick up the phone and talk to the administrator and say, can you tell me what this meeting is about, what we're going to be talking about at this meeting. One of the reasons it's important to thoroughly understand that is that you want to make sure that all of the necessary people will be in attendance at the meeting to resolve the issue, right? So if the issue at the meeting is going to be whether or not your child receives occupational therapy and the occupational therapist isn't there, then you're not going to be able to resolve the issue, right? So understanding the full purpose of the meeting will help you ensure that the necessary people are in at the IEP meeting and a decision can be made there. Okay? You should request notice from your school about its position, particularly if you have requested something from the school district and that's the topic of the meeting. So let's say that you have, you're asking the school to provide occupational therapy and your child's not getting it, right? It's always good to ask them what their position is on that. And you can get something called prior written notice from the school district. But if you go into the meeting already understanding what the school district's position is, you will be able to formulate better responses to their position. If you have time to understand that and do some research ahead of time or consult with experts ahead of time, right? So being prepared to respond to the school district is also part of your preparation prior to the meeting. Another good way to have effective meetings is to create an outline. I always ask all of my parents to send me an outline of what they want. It can be bullet points, just quick bullet points of what they want to get for their child. And that serves two purposes. It helps you to just tick off those issues as you're going through the meeting to make sure you really discuss every issue the parent is interested in discussing. And it also keeps you on track at the IEP meeting. So create bullet points or create an outline for yourself of things that you want to discuss. Another thing you can do is actually create an agenda that you send ahead of time to the school district, to the special ed coordinator or special ed administrator, and say, I've come up with an agenda for this meeting. These are the things I'd like to discuss, and this is a way I think that we can keep on track and have an effective and efficient meeting. Okay. So at the meeting, then you can stay on track by following your outline that you created or the agenda, depending on what you decide to do. You also need to make sure that you focus on current issues and not on past issues. As I stated before, many of the parents that I help have a long history with the school district, and it's generally not very good because parents don't call me when they're happy; they only call me when they have issues, right? So it's critical to try to not dwell on past issues or problems and stay focused on the current issues and try to move things forward. Okay? Another great way to be effective at IEP meetings is to make sure that you, as a parent, ask questions that keep the conversation flowing. Right? So yes or no questions are a way to shut the conversation down. So if you are looking for occupational therapy and you say to your school district or team, will you provide occupational therapy for my child? And the answer is no. That pretty much shuts down the conversation. So a better way to approach it is to stay away from answering no questions, but to ask questions that elicit conversation. So a better way of saying that might be, my child is having difficulty, with this skill. What do you think some of the supports are that you can provide to help with that skill? And that kind of way of asking schools for assistance really gets people thinking about the issue and keeps the conversation going. So try that kind of technique if you are getting shut down when you ask for things from your school. Stay calm is critical. I often build in little break times during IEP meetings for parents, so I can tell if a parent is getting upset by the conversation. I just ask for a little bit of a break, right? Or if we're getting stuck on an issue, or the school seems to be getting frustrated by the discussion, it's great just to take a break and let people kind of regroup and cool off and get back to the conversation. So staying calm is critical not only to keeping the conversation going and getting the answer that you want, but also portraying yourself as a parent that the school is able to work with and happy to work with. It just makes them more likely that they're going to find a way to give you what you want when you stay calm in these meetings. And then what you want to make sure you do is if you're able to reach agreement in the meeting, is to document any agreements that are reached. That can be done in a couple of ways. One way to do it is to document it on the actual IEP or 504 plan if the agreement involves a change to that document. If it doesn't involve a change to the IEP, but just some other aspect of your child's education, you can document it any way you want, right? You can put it on a little note, you can attach it to the IEP, but some kind of documentation is critical, right? So that people understand what the agreement was and who's responsible for that part of the part of the agreement. Okay, it's also good, obviously, to thank people if you've had a productive meeting. Also, you want to periodically follow up with the team to make sure that they're following through with the agreement that was reached. I have a lot of situations where parents think that they got what they wanted in the meeting, but it doesn't happen because they didn't build in a way to follow up. So one of the ways to do that is to document the decision and have a timeline and some next steps on the document and assign responsibility to particular people on the team to follow through with the agreement. And then you can periodically send emails or call and say, what's the status of this or that, to make sure that the school is following through. Also, if you've agreed to do something, make sure you follow through as well and communicate that. All right, so there's also a troubleshooting aspect to this process, and that is these are some of the more common things that we see in IEP meetings. Difficulty keeping the focus on your child. Sometimes parents want to make a recording of the IEP meeting, and that makes people uncomfortable. These are just issues for you to be aware of. And if any of these issues come up, I think the best thing to do is to take a look at our publication that I referenced at the beginning of this presentation, which gives you some really helpful tips on how to troubleshoot some of these issues. All right. So then the other thing you want to do is consider your team's strengths and needs, right? This is really important to making sure that you have the right team to resolve the issue that you're having. And some of the things that teams need to do to be able to resolve disputes is think outside the box. Maybe your team lacks some expertise or experience that you need, or supports and resources that you need to resolve your dispute. So it's critical to assess your team and determine, do you have the right people on the team to answer the question or resolve the dispute. So for example, if the issue that you're addressing is a behavioral problem, the question you ask is, do we have somebody on this team who understands behavior modification or the particular aspect of the child's disability that's causing the behavior? And if you don't have those kinds of things, you need to advocate to make sure that the supports that are necessary are on the team. Okay? And then if you're not able to resolve your dispute through the meeting process, you need to understand that you have other options available to you, and you need to know what they are, right? So if you've tried to advocate for yourself through the team process and it hasn't worked, the first step would be to look for an advocate to support you in that process. Somebody like me or other advocates available in your state may be able to attend a meeting with you. If they can't attend a meeting with you, they might be able to provide you with technical assistance or information that you can use to advocate for yourself. For example, our website has a series of FAQs on it that that sort of talk parents through the more common issues that come up in special education. So something like that you could use to try to help you advocate in a different way. So depending on what state you're from, you should do a little bit of research to find out what kind of advocacy support is available to you, what kind of information is available to you on your state website that you could use to help you better advocate for your child. Okay?
All right. We are getting some questions in. If you guys have questions, please go ahead and continue to type them in the chat box. And we will get started. So the first question, Kristin, is what about coming to your first IEP meeting with a paid advocate? How do schools view that?
Yeah, I think it depends on the district, but in general, I would discourage parents from starting off that way. Unless they have engaged in advocacy outside of the IEP meeting process and they know there's going to be a big problem, I think it's always best for parents to try to advocate for themselves without a paid advocate or an attorney with them. When you bring somebody like that, it does ratchet things up, and some school districts feel the need to bring someone themselves, and then it sort of takes away from the relationship building aspect between the parent and the district. So I would encourage parents to try that first meeting themselves, and if they don't resolve their dispute, they just don't sign the IEP and they ask for another meeting, at which point they could bring an advocate with them, right? So especially if you have a younger child, you still have to be in that district for many years working with those people, and it's always best just to try to work it out between you and the district, because it sets a better tone initially.
Okay. Thank you. We had a comment and question. It says, biggest problem that we are having is with all things, there are teachers and therapists that vary in how well they do their jobs. So when you have a child on the spectrum, stakes are much higher. What can we do when that is the main problem we are facing and that it affects how the IEP is followed?
I think the first thing that you want to do is you need to understand why the teacher is having difficulty, right? Because the reason for the difficulty will guide the way to resolve it. So you might have a teacher who doesn't understand the disability. You might have a teacher who is afraid of failure. You might have a teacher who is burned out. So it's critical to understand where that person is coming from so you can create the right supports for that person. So that's the first thing that you want to do, right? What is going on? Why is the teacher not doing the job? It might be that the teacher doesn't have the right resources, has a lot of high-needs kids in the classroom and not enough support from the administration. So identify that first and then try to figure out what the best response to that is, understanding that you have to be really diplomatic when the issue is a teacher not doing the job, because the surest way to shut down communication is to suggest that there's a problem with the teacher, right? So you have to figure out the diplomatic way to get what you want. It might be that you don't directly address this issue with the teacher, but you talk with the special ed administrator outside of that teacher's hearing and see if there's some way that person can get some additional supports and services in the classroom.
Okay. Here's a question about preparing for the meeting. You said to request notice from school about its position on your request. If a district responds, would that be considered predetermination?
Okay, can you say that again?
Sure. And this is a question about preparing for the meeting. And it says you said to request notice from the school about its position on your request. But if the district responds, would that be considered predetermination?
Well, I think potentially it could be, but what the district needs to do is to have open discussion at the IEP meeting about the issue and all sides' position about the issue, right? So it's not, it wouldn't always be predetermination. It just depends on what the issue is, right? So to the extent that you can, you want to get as much information about where they're coming from so that you're able to respond. And it might be that the school district provides you with several different responses to your request, right? So if, for example, the issue is your child's placement, and you ask them ahead of the meeting, what are the options for placement? And they reply to you, we have these 4 options on our continuum, right? That wouldn't be predetermination. That's just information about what's available for your child. So, again, it just depends on what their response is. A savvy school district is not going to respond to you in a way that it would be considered predetermination, but in a way that explains the options available to your child.
Okay. We did have a follow-up on the question regarding bringing a paid advocate. And it says, do you think bringing a fellow parent and not a paid advocate is viewed differently?
I think it is viewed differently unless your fellow parent is viewed as a problematic person by the school district. So we've had that exact scenario here in Ohio. And so really, it just depends on who the person is you're bringing. If it's your neighbor and they're portrayed as somebody who's going to be taking notes for you, so that you can fully participate in the meeting and not worry about taking notes, then I think most school districts would be very open to that kind of a thing. If that person is seen as genuine support for you and your participation in the meeting. If that is a parent who goes to a lot of IEP meetings or is sort of a lay advocate, so to speak, in the district, I think it might be viewed differently. So, really, those are the things you need to look at. How will this person be received by your particular district, depending on who that person is.
Sure. Okay. Next question. Who has the greatest say in the IEP meeting? For example, what if the parents and doctors want one thing, but teachers and administrators want another? And this is an ongoing debate regarding a one-on-one aid for a child with multiple disabilities.
Okay. Right. So even though the IEP process is supposed to be a collaborative process and parents are supposed to have meaningful participation in the process, the bottom line is that the school district will make its decision, and then you as a parent will need to respond depending on what you think is appropriate, right? So in this ongoing dispute about the aid, where the school district says the child doesn't need an aid, I'm guessing, if that's their position, that's their position, and then the parent needs to figure out how to respond to that. It might be the parent decides to get an expert and try to use expert support to convince the school. But the bottom line is if the school doesn't want to offer that service, they don't have to, and then the parent has the option then of following one of the remedies available to them to try to have an impartial decision maker decide the issue.
All right. we had a question. Could I have my son evaluated for OCD? He didn't have any issues before when he was in middle school, and now he's going into high school.
Okay, so you as a parent can have your child evaluated for OCD by a private provider anytime you want to, right? So if you want to get a psychologist or somebody to diagnose your child, you can do that. OCD is not a category of eligibility under special ed. So what you need to understand is that the diagnosis of a disability and the category for special education eligibility are different things, right? So you can ask your school district to evaluate your child for eligibility for special education under one of the existing categories of eligibility. Those are things like autism, traumatic brain injury, specific learning disability, emotional disturbance, those kinds of categories, right? But the diagnosis of OCD is not something a school district would give you. They would determine whether or not your child, because of his diagnosed disabilities, qualifies under one of the special education categories of eligibility. I hope that answers your question.
All right. This one, my daughter's IEP was not followed. I complained and was told that the teachers and staff were not to communicate with me any further. This was because I asked for a meeting to discuss the problem with a teacher. Do you have any comments on that? It doesn't look like it was a question as much as just a comment.
Yeah, I mean, that's unfortunate. We see that kind of thing happen as well here. I think that means that you are now in a position of probably trying to get an advocate to go with you to an IEP meeting because the district has clearly communicated to you that they don't want you trying those lower tiered methods of communication. So I would suggest you ask for another IEP meeting and try to get an advocate to go with you.
Okay.
Or at least get some information from somebody for suggestions on how to advocate for yourself at the meeting.
Okay. Next question, comment says, I heard someone say here not to sign until you agree with resolution. But she's been told by the school that after year 1 to start services that signature is not required again.
Okay, so that's correct. So in special education, the parent is required to sign the very first IEP because consent is required for the very first IEP and the provision of the first special education services. Once that initial IEP is in place, the school district can propose a new IEP, the next year's IEP, and implement that IEP without the parent's signature. There are some exceptions to that rule, and those are generally state-specific exceptions. For example, in Ohio, school districts need parental consent to change a child's placement on the continuum. So if a child was going to be moved from special education to regular education or a segregated setting to a different type of setting, the school couldn't implement that IEP without the parent's signature because it's a change in placement. But if 1 year a child has speech therapy and the next year the school takes it off, the school can just go ahead and implement that. And then it's up to the parent to try to stop that change by using one of the remedies available to them.
Okay. How would you suggest responding to a teacher who indicates that using modified spelling tests for a dyslexic child is cheating? For example, they had a teacher say, at the beginning of the year, she passed her spelling test without the cheats. I mean, modification.
Okay, so what I would do in this scenario is is solicit the assistance of some type of expert. So somebody who is a reading expert would be able to make a recommendation or provide some assessment data or information to the IEP team. And then the IEP team should be in a position to make a decision about what types of modifications or accommodations are necessary for that child. And then those should be documented clearly on the IEP, right? So this kind of an issue, what are the appropriate modifications or accommodations for a dyslexic child really should be coming from somebody who has expertise in reading for a child with dyslexia. That teacher may or may not have that expertise. But even if the teacher does, the parent should look to solicit some expert support if the teacher disagrees with them.
Okay, let's see, next one. How do you communicate a child's abilities during an ARD meeting? For example, a teenager with autism has verbalized that he dislikes life skills class in PE and has verbalized wanting to go to art and computer classes. He is currently contained in the special education classroom all day. How could I prove that the child deserves to at least try these classes in general education?
That's a tough one, right? I mean, I think if to the extent that the child is comfortable verbalizing what they want in the IEP meeting, then that is one of the better ways to try to change the school district's position, particularly for an older student, because you know, most school districts understand that success requires some buy-in from the students, particularly older students. So that would be the first thing that I would do if that child is comfortable advocating for themselves in the IEP meeting. If they're not, you could ask the student to write up a written statement that the parent or somebody else can read to the IEP team, and it can become a part of the student's record, explaining their preferences, particularly if these are elective courses, and there's some ability to choose, then most good school districts will allow that kind of preference.
Okay.
And then if that doesn't work, there's some expert type of a person who could come in and talk to the team. Maybe the child works with a therapist or a counselor or somebody who can communicate the child's wishes and why accommodating those wishes is important to that child's future. And then I guess the other way to address it is through the transition process available in IDEA or the Federal Special Education Law. If this is an older child, 16 and up, then it's critical to include that child in any decision about curriculum and coursework that leads to whatever their preferred transition goal is. So if you can use that transition planning process to funnel that child into the elective courses that he's interested in, that can be an effective way of resolving that kind of dispute.
Okay. How do you know if goals are measurable in the IEP? What if there isn't anything written in the PLAF of the IEP?
All right, so what if there isn't anything written in the what?
So it says, how do you know if goals are measurable in the IEP? So that's the first question. And then what if there isn't anything written in the PLAF, so the present levels of the IEP?
Okay. Well, clearly, if there's nothing written in the present levels, it's not measurable, right? Because the only way we know if there's been progress on the goal is to know where the child starts. And the present levels establish that baseline. So it's pretty much clear that if there's no present level, you can't measure it, right? In terms of the other thing you want to make sure is that the present level actually relates to the content of the goal or vice versa, right? So you don't want to have present levels that are on a different issue or topic than the goal that that you have, because similarly you would not be able to measure progress in that regard, right? The question about how you know if a goal is measurable is a complex question. There's a lot of ways to look at a goal to try to figure out if it's measurable. There's a lot of parameters involved in that. There are some good resources available online. If you Google, measurable IEP goals, for example, a lot of things come up. But to give you a simple answer to your question, one of the things that I always tell parents is if you handed the IEP to your next door neighbor, would they know what your child is working on, right? So is it written in a way that you understand what the child is working on as a critical component of a measurable goal? And then you also want to make sure it's written in terms of identifiable tasks, right? So if your goal says something like, Kristin is going to improve her reading, that's not measurable at all, because as we all know, reading is a complex thing. There's a lot of different components to reading. The general statement of improved reading is not a measurable thing. So you want to look for clearly identified tasks. You want to look for, numbers and amounts and time, duration and scope kinds of parameters to make sure that you have a clear identified task. You can tell by how much it's going to be improved over what period of time. Those are the kinds of things that you look at. But that's a complex thing, so the best thing to do, I think, is to look at some of the information that's available online.
Okay, we do need to go ahead and wrap up the question and answer session for this training, but we are going to keep a list of the questions asked, and we can send those on to Kristin, and we can answer some as well. I did save everything, so you will get an answer to your question, but we do need to go ahead and move on to our next speaker. Thank you so much, Kristin. I know everybody really enjoyed it. Thank you. All right, Christina.
Okay, Brandi, hi. There you go, Brandi.
All right.
Hi. Okay, Megan, can you introduce Brandi?
Yes, ma'am. All right, our next speaker is Miss Brandi Timmons. She's presenting on Back to School Without Tears. Brandi is the Education Director for Social Motion Skills, which is a nonprofit in Houston, Texas that provides both on-site and virtually a lifespan of social, vocational, and independent living skills training to individuals with social and cognitive challenges. She is a licensed behavior analyst and has 15 years in the public school setting as a special education teacher and as an autism specialist. Brandi loves to write and uses that skill daily in writing social skills lesson and parent educator trainings. Her passion is creating a high level of expectation for students and then supporting them as they rise to meet those expectations. So thank you so much for being here, Brandi. I will open up your mic and leave it to you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Christina, for inviting me to be with you guys today. I'm excited about this. I can hardly believe today is already August the 9th and we're talking about going back to school. It seems like the summer has just flown by. Like Megan said, I am the Education Director at Social Motion Skills. We provide a lifespan of services to individuals with social cognitive challenges. My passion is teaching social skills, so I'm extremely fortunate to have a job that doesn't feel like going to a job. But I also taught in a self-contained classroom for almost 15 years, and I had the privilege of teaching middle school and high school students with many different diagnoses, a wide range of abilities. So I've had many years of experience with back-to-school transitions, and I understand and I get how difficult they can be for both you and your child. So our goals today, sorry, give me just a second. I'm having trouble advancing the slide.
That's okay, Brandi. Do you want me to help you out?
Yeah, please. Sorry.
Did it change for you?
No.
Okay. So if you'll kind of mouse over on the left hand of your screen.
Got it.
And if you'll just press down under the 1.
Okay, gotcha. Sorry.
No problem.
There we go. Okay, thank you. All right, so our goals today, we're going to look at, first of all, why is going back to school difficult for our kiddos? And then number 2, we're going to look at some home-based strategies to make the transition easier for you guys. And finally, some school-based strategies that are going to help you to make that transition easier. So why is transitioning back to school so difficult for our kids? Many of our students have difficulties with transitions in general. So when you think about going back to school, it only really makes sense about how stressful it is. They have to learn a new schedule all over again. Some of them may be changing schools. They may be changing teachers. They may have to learn to wear new or different clothing that they're not accustomed to or that they just really don't like. And then, of course, there's all the social issues that they have to deal with, the unknown of friends and friendships. And when you add all these things up, it all adds up to unpredictability and change, and it's just really scary for our guys. So it's no wonder that the transition is so stressful for them. The definition of anxiety is recurring or constant feeling of fear or dread of a perceived threat that is triggered by specific situations, stimuli, or the body's natural fight or flight response. And the key word here is perceived. It doesn't matter whether we feel that something's scary or stressful. If something causes your child anxiety, it's very real to them, and it becomes your job then to help them to overcome the anxiety. So think about all the phobias that exist in the world. Do they all make sense to us? Probably not, but they do exist, and they have names, and they're in the medical books, and to the person that has that phobia, it makes a lot of sense. So we have to think about that when we're dealing with our kiddos. You know, just because they're afraid of something and it seems so simple to us, it doesn't mean that it's not real to them, and we have to keep that in the forefront of our mind. I'm also an autism specialist, so in order to better support the students that I work with, I do a lot of research on evidence-based practices and issues that affect the kiddos that I work with. And one of the hot topics right now is anxiety and how it affects our kids. And some of the statistics are pretty overwhelming. When you look at the studies, they range everywhere from 13.6 to 84% of those that are on the autism spectrum have a diagnosed anxiety disorder. And with children with ID, from 8.7 to 21.9% of those kiddos have an actual diagnosed anxiety disorder. That's pretty overwhelming when you stop and think about that. So why do so many of our kids have these issues? Well, when you think about all the things that we work on, it's really not surprising. So our kids typically have a need for routine and structure. They have difficulties with emotional regulation. They have difficulty with understanding other people's views, their thoughts, and their feelings. They have difficulty coping with social situations, and often they have difficulty explaining to other people their feelings and their wants and their needs. So even when they know that a situation is stressful to them, they're not able to explain to us what they need, and they're not able to get that help that will help them through the situation. And then you complicate situations with difficulty understanding language. Lots of our kiddos don't understand figurative language. They're very literal-minded, and people talk too fast. They use too many words, and they don't give them enough time to process information. So you take all of that, you put all those things together, and it's no wonder that many of our kids are dealing with so much anxiety. One of the best articles that I've read about kids with anxiety was written by Karen Young, and it's found on heystigman.com. It's called How to Deal with School Anxiety, No More Distressing Goodbyes. She talks a lot about how to help the child understand what's causing their fears and how to deal with that. You know, we talk a lot about people-first language and talking about person-centered planning, but when we're dealing with anxiety and we're dealing with social issues, a lot of times we forget to help those children understand, you know, what's really causing it. You know, where is this fear coming from, and why am I feeling anxious and mom's not feeling anxious about it, you know? So how do I get rid of this? So it's important for us to understand that school anxiety is not a case of won't, but it's a case of can't. They're actually, their bodies are going into that fight or flight, and they can't make those feelings go away. They can't just take them and get rid of them. So we have to find strategies to help them to deal with those fears. And the number one strategy that you have to start with is actually for you as the parent or the caregiver. You need to be your child's number one source of calm. Don't let them see that you're anxious about starting school. And that may be difficult. In the past, you may have had lots of issues. You may have had crying. You may have had tantrums that come with school starting. And you may be feeling stressed yourself in anticipation of everything that you have to do, everything that goes into getting your child ready to go back to school. So how do you deal with that? Well, number one, you take care of yourself. And that's a lot of parents, you know, you've got so many different things on your plate, and especially when you're dealing with a child with a disability or special needs, then you don't make the time for yourself. But when you're starting back to school and you're trying to help your child to stay calm, this is so important. You've got to find the time to take care of yourself. So you need to make sure that you schedule in for you all of those things that are relaxing and all those things that help you to stay calm. So we're going to start with strategies for the home. We're going to look at some planning things that you can do, and we're going to look at some organization things that you need to do to get started. The first thing is pretty obvious, but you're going to start a school routine early. Don't wait until the morning of school to have your child get up at 6 o'clock and carry out their school routine. Depending on your child's ability to adjust to a change in routine, you may need to even start 2 to 3 weeks before school. If you have enough time, you could make the changes gradually so they're not so overwhelming. You could add one change in a week if you needed to. You could start, even if you just started the week before school, add one change for a couple of days and then add the next change. And of course, that'll depend on how well your child adjusts. But I would start by going to bed earlier in the evenings. Make sure your child's going to be getting plenty of sleep each night. So you're going to have to plan for difficulties going to sleep. Make sure you know what it's going to take to help them to go to sleep and to stay asleep and to make sure that they wake up refreshed. One of the things that you probably are going to have to do is start decreasing screen time. A lot of our kids during the summer have a lot of free time, and we may be more lax with letting them play video games and letting them play on the iPads. So start decreasing that screen time ahead of time. Don't let it be a shock to them the week that school starts. And then you're going to need to start waking up earlier in the morning. Lots of our kids, and us included, if we get to stay home with them, have gotten into the routine of just sleeping late in the mornings and taking our time and doing whatever we need to do. And it's going to be difficult on them if they have to start on Monday morning getting up 2 hours earlier than they typically do. So go ahead and adjust those times in the morning. And for older students, this is a really, really great time to start working on some independent skills. So start teaching them to use an alarm clock. Get them an alarm clock and set it for them. It's a skill that's going to benefit everybody in the family if they learn to do that on their own. So you might even plan a special breakfast or a short outing or something if they are able to wake themselves up on their own independently. And then start including a homework time in the evenings. Don't make them actually do work to start with, but start scheduling some type of a craft or an art activity, just as long as you have a scheduled time. If it's 30 minutes, if it's an hour, it doesn't matter. Just make sure that they know that this is going to be your scheduled homework time. Have them sit wherever you decide that homework is going to take place. Give them a timer and give them an activity that they have to complete while they're sitting there. And like I said, it could be something fun to start with. Make it seem to them like they're not doing work, just a fun time. And you don't have to call it homework time yet, but they're going to be getting used to having that structured time that they probably haven't had during much of the summer. And then create visual schedules for morning and afternoon routines. Go ahead and get those started. Most of you are probably used to this. A lot of you probably have visual schedules in your home already. Most of your kiddos are probably use visual schedules at school. They can be pull-off pictures that are Velcroed. They can be checklists. You know, visual schedules can be real pictures. They can be clip art. Anything that your child needs to help them to follow those routines and those schedules without you having to tell them everything to do. It's so important that we start doing this when they're young so that we can build those into independent skills later when they're older. And one of the things that happens with visual schedules, I saw this so many times teaching in public school, is when the kids are little and we're using picture schedules and they learn to do that, we're all excited and we're so thrilled that they can do that, that we take them away from them because we think they've learned the routines. So the mistake that's being made there is all of us depend on visual schedules. I could not make it through the day if I did not have my Google Calendar. I would not make it to appointments on time. I would never get my assignments completed, all those daily tasks that I need to do. We have a program at work that we use, an app called Asana, where you know, everything is scheduled and we know when our deadlines are. Those are all visual schedules, and our kids need to know how to use those. So just because your little one has succeeded and has mastered the picture schedules, don't take them away, just change them. If they're using pictures now, we'll go ahead and change it to words. And then you might go ahead and change that later into the checklist. And eventually, as your kiddos have their own phones, they have their own smartwatches, their own tablets, teach them to use the apps and the programs that are there. Anything that they can do that's going to help them be more independent is going to be so beneficial to them when they start transitioning out of high school and into employment and into secondary education. So anything that you can do now is going to be beneficial to them later. Don't wait until the last minute to shop for new clothes. Some of our kids have sensory issues, some of them don't. Some of them just don't like the change. So don't wait until the weekend before they start school. Go shopping early. Make a plan, figure out what they need, and include your kids in that. Include your kids in that planning. Again, building those independent skills and helping them decide, you know, what am I going to need to wear? If they have uniforms, help them decide what you need to shop for. Help them to create lists. You know, a lot of our kids don't feel like they have much control in their life. Everything is done for them. We plan their schedules. You know, we tell them where to go, we tell them what they have to do, we tell them how to behave, and they just don't have much control over everything that happens in their lives. So everything that you can do to give them a piece of that control back is going to make them feel more secure. It's going to build their independence and their confidence levels. So include them in all of the shopping. And then once you buy all those new clothes, don't save them. Let them wear them. Let them wear them and get them broken in. Now, I know you're thinking, I don't want them to wear them and get stains all over them. That's fine. Choose somewhere that they're going to be able to wear them, that they're not going to get them dirty. It may be for an hour or two at home. Just let them wear them around so they get used to them. If they have something that's going to bother them, if there are tags, if there's a material that itches or they just can't deal with it, then you know that they can't deal with it before they get to school and it becomes an issue. So go ahead and let them wear them, let them break them in, let them get used to all of those new clothes. Schedule eye and dentist exams before school starts, and any other doctor's appointments. Anything that you know that's coming up, don't schedule them the first few weeks of school. I wouldn't even schedule them during the first month or so. You know, your kids are going to be stressed enough and have enough anxiety trying to learn new schedules and trying to get used to being back in school. The last thing that they need is having a kink thrown in that schedule. You know, having mom say, oh, I'm going to pick you up early today. Well, if it's the first couple of weeks of school, then they may have to start over, you know, learning that routine again. So anything that you can do to schedule those things before school starts, or at least wait a month or two into the school year, is going to help them feel more comfortable and not disrupt them learning the new schedules. This is a big one. The first week of school, you already know you're going to be stressed. Everybody's going to be tired. It's going to be hard on the whole family. So think about meal planning. And I know that meal planning is not for everyone. I've seen people that meal plan for the whole month, and that is something I could never in a million years do. But for this 1 week, the very first week at least, or possibly even the first 2 weeks, go ahead and meal plan. There's some great resources on Pinterest. All you have to do is Google, and you're going to be able to find tons of recipes that are simple, they're healthy. You know, you can plan those ahead of time, go ahead and shop on the weekend, have that out of the way. Anything that you can do to prep before the week, go ahead and prep. There may be vegetables that you can chop and keep in the freezer, you know, and take it a step further. If you use a crock pot or an Instapot, go ahead and get those recipes ready. And all you have to do is pull them out of the freezer, throw them in the pot, and by the time you get home that afternoon, your family's meal is ready. So I can't emphasize enough how much stress that's going to take off of you if you take that little bit of time the weekend before and get ready for that. Another big one. I know a lot of you parents, you do everything that you possibly can for your kids. You probably feel stretched to the limit. You know, most of you could have a second title of Superwoman or Superman because of all the things that you do for your kids. Just know that it's okay to ask for help. If you know that the first week of school is going to be stressful, you know, if your husband, if your wife, if your mom, your in-law, a best friend, someone, if they could schedule to be there, if you need help in the mornings, you know, just maybe taking care of another child and getting them ready for school while you're taking care of the second child. Don't be afraid to ask for that. It's okay to ask for help. Most of us have someone in our lives that are going to be willing to do that for us. And a lot of times those people are waiting for us to ask. They don't want to interfere. You know, they don't want to step in where they're not wanted. So go ahead and make that step and ask for that extra help. Social narratives. Social narratives, a lot of you are probably familiar with these as well. The transition back to school is the perfect time to start doing this. Social narratives should always be written in the first person. They should be written from your child's point of view. They need to be simple. Preferably pick one topic for each story. And they need to be read often. A social narrative should be read daily. If it's a situation or a topic that's extremely stressful for your child, you might read it a couple of times a day, okay? Include your child in writing the social narratives. If you're talking about, let's say a child is going to have a new teacher, if you have a chance to get a picture of that teacher to include in the story, do that. But write it from the child's point of view and help them to write that and explain to them, you know, you might be writing about the new teacher, and for instance, the story might say, I'm going to have a new teacher this school year. Her name is Mrs. Johnson. I'm going to miss my teacher from last year, but I know that my new teacher is going to care for me the same, okay? That's how the story should read. That's what it's going to sound like. And you're going to walk through those issues that your child might be dealing with. But the more that they're able to read that with you, the more that you're able to talk about that, the more beneficial it's going to be for your child. Have behavior strategies in place and be prepared to reinforce the things that go right. I know that it might be difficult to think about that because you're expecting everything to go wrong. But, you know, our kids surprise us when I love to talk about assuming competency. That's one of my favorite trainings to do. And I always tell people, you know, the higher the expectations we place in our kids, the higher their success rate. Our kids want to please us. They want to do things that are right. They want to do those things that are expected of them. You know, so set those expectations. This goes back to you showing them that calm and not being anxious yourself. Expect things to go right, and then when they do, be ready to reinforce them. Be ready to praise, have things in place. You know, if the first day goes amazingly well, have something prepared that afternoon to reinforce your child with. It may need to be smaller than that. You may need to back up and that week before school when you're changing routines, if the first day they get up on time and they are no complaining, then take them to the park that morning. Reinforce that. Make sure that everything that they do right doesn't go unnoticed. Don't let them know that you're expecting those things to go wrong. Make sure that you're prepared to reinforce the things that happen that should happen. And this one's a bit difficult, but it makes so much sense. Don't schedule lots of fun stuff the week before school starts. So many parents try to schedule that last-minute vacation. They try to do everything they can that last week of school and even that last weekend before school just to enjoy that time with their kids and to put that last bit of fun in there. The intentions are great. The intentions are wonderful. But when you really stop and think about it, what are we doing? We're reinforcing to our kids that being at home is the place to be. We're reinforcing that, you know, going back to school is just not going to be fun. So do everything that you can to, you know, plan all that fun stuff at the beginning of the summer, but a couple of weeks before school starts, go ahead and stop planning all the fun stuff. If you have to, make being at home as boring as it can possibly be. Just hang around the house. If you have to do spring cleaning, that's great. You know, just don't plan all these really super fun things that are going to remind your child that what they're going to be missing out on when they go back to school. You want to make your child want to go back to school. Stress the positives. The more positive you are, the more secure your child is going to feel. Talk to your child about all the good things that are going to happen at school. This may sound like an obvious thing, but a lot of times, you know, we get caught up in talking about issues that we've had. We're concerned about IEP meetings. We're concerned about making sure that we get all the accommodations and the modifications that are needed. And without knowing it, we can really easily fall into the trap of dwelling on the negative things that happen at school. So number one, don't let your child hear you talking about those things. Don't let your child hear you talking about all the stressful situations that you're worried about. Stress the positives. Talk about the fact that they're going to get to see their friends. Talk about all the fun things that they're going to learn this year. As a social skills teacher here at our center, you know, that's one of the biggest issues that we see with kids is having to change their frame of thinking from negative to positive. Our kids naturally dwell on the negative things that they hear, and a lot of them get stuck there, and it's difficult to change that. So be as positive as you can possibly be. Be very intentional about stressing those things that are good about school so that your child can start changing their way of thinking and start reframing their thinking about going back to school. Don't overschedule the first few weeks. I talked about the doctor's appointments, and but this is even a little different than that. Don't schedule after school activities. You know, a lot of us have so many different things that our kids are involved in. A lot of our kids have different therapy appointments. You know, a lot of our kids are involved in extracurricular activities. Now's not the time to schedule those. If in any way, you know, any way possible, at least the first week, try to cut out as many things as you possibly can. I understand therapy, that may not be possible to do that, but if it is, now would be a good time for them to take a break. If that's something that's okay with their therapist, with OT, PT, speech, whoever, if it's okay for them to miss a week, this would be the time to do it. Schedule that first, don't overschedule the first week. Take a break off, let everyone get adjusted, and it'll pay off in the long run. Your kids will be more rested, they'll be more prepared and more ready to get back to everything the following week. And finally, have safety measures in place if needed. If your child has any type of wandering issues, elopement issues, make sure you have those things in place. There are lots of good resources now that you can reach out to. Road ID makes some wonderful ID shoe badges that you can place on their shoes, on their shoestrings. Angel Sense is a great one to reach out to. For your older kiddos that are in middle school and high school, make them ID cards. Make sure that they have all that identification in place. If your kids are able to learn their personal information, make sure that they know it. So many times when I was teaching in public school, my kids didn't even know their mom and dad's real names. We have to be intentional about those things. Expect our kids to know those things. Teach them those things. Excuse me. And if that's not possible right now, make sure those things are on their persons at all time in some way. Make sure that that contact information, that emergency information is with your child. Sew it into their backpack, sew it into their clothes if you have to. Just make sure that you have all of those things available. Depending on where you live now, a lot of the police departments and the emergency responder departments have measures in place where you can have your child's information documented. If they were to elope and someone were to find them, they would have them in a database and be able to identify them. So those are all things to check into. Those are all things that are necessary and good for our kids to have in place. So now is a good time for you to work on that. All right, moving on to organization at home. Establish a school station in your house. Make sure that there's a place in your home for backpacks and lunch kits. Make sure that your child knows where that is. And that couple of weeks before school starts, have them practice hanging the backpack up. Have them practice keeping their things there. This is a great way for you to teach your child to be independent again. Have them help you the night before. Get everything ready. Have it put in place and ready to go as they walk out the door, okay? I liked these examples because they were all placed close to the door. You can see the one on the right that's labeled with their initials. Everybody has a place. Everybody knows where their things are. I like the one that's hanging on the back door as well. Easily accessible. Everyone knows if the backpack and the lunch kit's not there, we better find it. We better get it in its place before we get ready to leave in the morning. Schedules. As your kiddos get older, they're going to have more classes to go to. And even if they're in one class, it might be good to do this as well. But take your student's schedule and write out their daily schedule on an index card. And include times for bathroom breaks in that. Help them organize that time and figure out, what class are you going to today? As they get to middle school and they start having different classes, that becomes more difficult. I saw a lot of kids that had trouble with being late because they didn't know how to schedule in time for bathroom breaks. So that's something to help them with. I like the idea of using colored index cards because I'm going to talk to you in just a second about color coding everything for their classes. So if you have the schedules for the day, our kids do well with color coding. Again, it's the visual planning that helps them. So you might try using the colored index cards. Color coding. If your child is going to different classes and is going to have homework for different classes, go ahead and buy them different colored notebooks and folders for each of those class periods. You might do red for English. So they would have a red notebook and a red homework folder. Blue for math. So they'd have a blue notebook and a blue math homework folder. The more that you can color code and the more that you can help them organize, the better off they're going to be when they get into high school and have to do these things on their own. A lot of our kiddos have difficulties with executive functioning, and that's where this comes in. I color code at work a lot of times with my folders. I don't realize it until I have my notebook setting out for different projects that I'm working on, but unconsciously I have, have a different color for each project. So it's just something that we might do naturally, and our kids need a little help with that. If your kids have an A-day, B-day schedule, have two backpacks. Have an A-day backpack and a B-day backpack, just to simplify. And again, this is for your older kiddos that are headed to middle school and high school. Just another way to simplify that planning. That way they would only have certain notebooks that are in those backpacks for each day. This is a big one. Create an information sheet on your child. Include basic information emergency information, likes, dislikes, favorite things, things that work at home, things that don't work at home. I cannot tell you how much this would have simplified my life as a teacher if every parent had provided this to me for their child. You know, as a parent, I guess sometimes we might assume that teachers are going to get this information the first day, but that doesn't always happen, depending on the school setting, depending on a lot of different factors. But if I had a child that walked in and had this sheet there, you know, it would have just eased my mind. And giving them strategies that work saves a lot of time. As a teacher, you know, we don't want to have to shoot in the dark trying to find out what's going to work for a child. So you as the parent are the expert. You as the parent know better than anyone else the things that work for your child. So share those things with your teachers. Share those likes and those dislikes, those favorite things, and help that teacher get to know your child so that they can better support your child. And last on this section, ask your child what he or she needs to be organized. We forget to do this sometimes. You know, it goes back to our kids not having control over their lives. You know, sometimes I know it's easier just to do things for them, but our kiddos need to have control over their lives. They need to learn to be assertive, and they need to learn to self-advocate. So when you're planning different things and organizing at home, ask your child what would help them. What do they need to help them feel more secure, not to feel so anxious, and to feel more organized at school? Make sure you include them in those planning stages. All right, moving on to school strategies. If you have a student that's changing schools, going to a new school, or even if you have a child that's just really highly anxious, start driving by the school during the summer. You know, just drive by and casually mention, oh, we're going by your school, you know, talk about it some. But if your child is going to a new school, be really intentional about it and get them used to that new route. Get them used to seeing the school and knowing that this is where they're going to be, and helping them to understand that it's okay. It's not a big deal. If you need to, go do some fun things at the school. Take your bicycles and ride in the parking lot. Take a picnic and have a picnic at the school in the playground. Take your child out for ice cream and just go eat ice cream on the playground. You know, have your child go with you to buy a donation of school supplies and then deliver them to the school. That way they're not associating the school with scary things. They're associating the school with fun things. And this, again, is regardless of if it's a new school to your child or if it's just returning after the summer. Just do these fun things and help them to realize, you know, school's not such a bad place to be. Sometimes good things happen there. If you can get permission, walk the hallways. You know, most teachers are there at least 2 weeks before school starts. Administration is usually there a lot earlier. Go with your child and walk the hallways and help them find the different places that they're going to need to know. Walk to the cafeteria, walk to the bathrooms, walk the path from their classroom to the front office, and help them to feel more secure about that. If you can, get permission and take a video of walking the route to the classrooms. Include your child in that and have your child video the route to the classrooms, just to make them feel more comfortable so that when they get there the first day, it's not something completely new, and it's, you know, it's taking the stress out of one piece of the puzzle. Arrange to meet the teacher before Meet the Teacher night. Again, the teachers are going to be at the school long before school starts. Call ahead and make an appointment. Most teachers are going to be thrilled if you do this. Call them and make an appointment for your child to go meet the teacher when there's not 100 people in the classroom, when the halls aren't crowded, so that it can be calm. The teacher can get to know your child alone without all the other kids around. You'll have more of an opportunity to talk and to be open with him or her, and just take that stress out of the whole situation again. So if there's any way for you to do this, I highly recommend it. If at all possible, find a peer partner or a mentor that's going to be there for your child. This is especially good for the older kids that are going to middle school or high school. Maybe a neighbor has a child, or a relative, or just a good friend that you know of from the community that would be willing to be a safe person for your child. If they have issues or problems, if they get lost, they'll have someone that they know who they can turn to and will be able to help them. If you don't know someone, go speak with the school counselor. I did this many, many times, and there were always kids that the counselor knew of that would be more than willing to be a peer mentor to my students. They've always got a list of kiddos that are wanting to do things like this, that are wanting to be involved. So feel free to go contact the counselor, the guidance counselor, and ask for that. And if possible, you can arrange a meeting before school starts and let the peer mentor get to know your child and just help them to understand what he or she might need from them. Depending on your child's conversation and language skills, practicing scripts can be very beneficial. You might help them write down different things that they might need to ask. For instance, I'm lost. Can you help me find my class, please? Well, it might be something that's easy for them to say, and they might not have any trouble with the actual words, but you think about when you get stressed. Simple things become difficult. So help your child to practice those things. Write down the different scenarios that could happen. For instance, if you have a child that's going to middle school and has a locker for the first time, it's not unlikely that they're going to have trouble opening their locker. So give them a script for that and practice it when they're calm, and practice it frequently, so that when they're in the middle of the situation and they're stressed, it's going to come back to them and not be so difficult to say. You might, how to ask for help, how to find a quiet place to calm down. That's something you might need to help them to script with. How to let a teacher know that they don't understand something. That's another good script to practice with your child. If your student is in all general education classes, make sure the teacher and staff are aware your child will be in their class. Again, as a public school teacher for so many years, I hate it, and I hate it's something that has to be talked about, but many, many times this does not happen. There were so many times that students that I was, supporting or just was aware of ended up in teachers' classes, and they had no idea the first day. They didn't know that they had a child with special needs in their classroom. So make sure it's okay to ask. It's okay for you to ask the principal and ask for a schedule. If you need to, go to the counselors, go to the special education department and ask them, do these general education class teachers know that my child is going to be in the class? Do they know how to deal with any situations that might arise? And have they had the correct training to have them in their classroom? You know, if you have a child with autism that is in all gen ed classes, then that teacher needs to know how to work with him. And so it's okay for you as a parent to ask if the teachers have received that training. And then make sure that all the staff in the school understands how to interact with your child. Make sure that the cafeteria workers, the librarians, the coaches, anyone that's going to come in contact with your child, it's okay to ask if they've had training as well. As a autism specialist, that's one of the things that I did was I provided training to those people in the school, and it made a world of difference. So you as a parent have a right to advocate for your child and ask those things. And then make sure that the teachers have received and are aware of all the necessary accommodations. Again, I hate that it's something that needs to be asked. It should be a given, but it doesn't always happen. It was very common for teachers not to receive those things until the first or second week into school, and that's not okay. So make sure that you ask those things. Make sure that you ask your child's teachers if they have received and are aware of all the accommodations that are necessary. And for some of our kiddos that are verbal and are able to talk about and discuss these things, have conversations with your child about disclosure. Make sure that your child understands that it's okay to talk about their diagnosis if they choose, and it's okay not to. I know that's a personal decision with you as a family, but make sure that you have those conversations with your children. Make sure, again, that they are being given the tools that they need to self-advocate for themselves. So those are all conversations that need to happen before school. And finally, just a couple of things for some of our older kids. Those that are going into middle school and high school, provide opportunities to practice opening and closing locks on their lockers. Make sure that they're comfortable with that. If you have to make arrangements to go into the school and do that, that's fine. If you have a child that has a locker for the first time, request that their locker be close to the door of a classroom so that they have someone that they can ask for help. And talk to the teacher that's in that classroom and make sure that they are aware. Read through the student handbook and the code of conduct with your students. Make sure that they understand what the rules are. Make sure they understand what the expectations are. And then explain that each teacher will have their own classroom rules and the rules may be different. For some of our kids, this is a big deal and it's difficult. It's hard to understand why one teacher might have a rule that's different from someone else. So make sure that you go over those things with your children. And again, if your child has a diagnosis, make sure you discuss disclosure with them. So I know that's a lot of information. A lot of this may pertain to you or may not, depending on your child, but I hope it's helpful. I hope that you'll be able to use some of these things. And I hope all of you have a great school year. I know Megan, I think, is going to open up for some questions, so feel free to ask anything that you have right now.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Brandi. That was great.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have a couple of questions, and I figure more will probably come in as we talk.
Okay.
But the first question is, my daughter has problems with coping skills. What do you recommend? And she's a teenager, just turned 15.
Coping skills, the biggest thing you can do for your child is find a social skills group. Find someone that is doing, that's teaching skills using behavioral strategies, preferably with lots of prompting and modeling. Make sure that it's a group that there's going to be a lot of natural environment training where she gets to generalize those skills. His practice, practice makes possible. And that's going to be the best thing that you can do for her.
Okay, let's see our next one. And this comes, part of it's a comment, and then we get into the question. The biggest problem that we face with my child on the spectrum, whose challenges are predominantly social, is that he is treated as he won't at school when more often than not it's he can't. At least he can't the way that they want. Parents have started to consider homeschooling with community group activities to help with socialization. What can we do to reset his school experience as a last-ditch effort to make it work? And it does state that the relationship with the district is somewhat adversarial.
You know, that's a huge question. As a public school teacher, you know, one of the biggest issues that I saw was a lack of expectation for our kids. It's assumed because they have autism or because they have a disability that they're not capable or that they can't do things. And so the expectations aren't there, you know, and depending on, you know, depending on your child, I've also seen those kiddos that come in and they're in gen ed classes and people don't understand that the social difficulties that they have are real. They think the child is just being bad. They don't understand the difficulties with coping socially and with having, you know, difficulty with perspective taking abilities and such. So a lot of that comes back to the attitude of the school district. You know, it's a really difficult decision for parents, but sometimes taking them out of the school district is the best scenario. One of the trainings that I do is a training on having high expectations and having school districts change their thinking. And you know, that's not an easy task to do. For you as a parent, I would recommend lots of sit-down one-on-ones with the teacher. You know, again, you are your child's expert. Sit down with them and explain to them what he is capable of doing and what he needs support with, and just advocate as much as you can that he gets those supports and see how that goes.
All right, thank you for that. Now we've got, what if the child is nonverbal? How could he be helped?
A little bit of clarification maybe. Helped in what way?
My assumption is like on the social level, but we can wait and see if we get clarification and answer the question while we're waiting.
Yeah. Okay.
What books on social skills do you recommend for middle schoolers?
Books on social skills. One of the books that I like is Jed Baker, How to Prepare for Life. That would probably be the one that I would start with.
Okay. Yes, so the clarification is on social. He won't ask when he needs help.
Okay. He's nonverbal?
It says nonverbal.
Okay, well, just because he's nonverbal, as long as he's able to communicate, you know, if he has a communication device or, you know, if he's using a visual communication board, if he's able to do that, then I would say that the social skills training would be the same as what you would do with any child. And, you know, if he's not asking for help, I would, again, script and practice. You know, practice in situations when there's not a problem. Have him practice repetitively, asking different people for help, so that when he gets in a situation that he needs it, he'll be more likely to do so.
Okay. I don't see any more questions.
Okay.
Christina, can you just double check me and make sure we didn't miss anything?
Yes, I can.
Okay, we have a question coming in.
Okay.
My child was born with Down syndrome and has been in the same school for years. This year he'll be in 4th grade and has very little speech. Do you think it's a good idea to go before Meet the Teacher Day to meet the new teacher?
Absolutely. Yeah. Anytime that you can go before Meet the Teacher Day and have a personal one-on-one meeting with the teacher, it's going to be beneficial to everyone. You're going to have more opportunity to ask the teacher personal questions and get the teacher to know your child better. Your child's probably going to be more likely not to be anxious, and she's going to get a better picture of your child in that one-on-one.
Okay, good job. I know there's a question that I'm not seeing from earlier, but it says, what about teachers getting training?
What about teachers getting training?
Is that for social skills? I'm waiting to see if the person will respond.
I think I found it, Megan. I'm fixing to post it.
Okay.
Okay, you should see it now.
Christina, I'm still not seeing it. Can you?
Okay. Let me send it directly to you, Megan.
Sorry.
Okay. Can you?
Here we go.
All right.
What can you do if your team is not knowledgeable about your child's disability and how to appropriately educate them in an inclusive environment? Parent has advocated for more training, research, and shared common accommodations, but they are still lacking, and it's inhibiting her son in being able to receive appropriate education because of the lack of experience.
You know, if you've already advocated and tried to do it, I would, start number one by going to probably to the principal of the school and helping them to understand, about the disability and helping them to understand, what exactly it is that you're wanting everyone to know. If it's a disability that's not common, you might offer to do a presentation yourself and to provide information to the school personnel that need to know about that disability and about what they can do to help your child.
Perfect. And remember, if you have a question for Kristin, who presented earlier, we are sending those to her, and she will be back with some answers, and we'll be able to get those over to you. We do have one more question. Is there a way that we can correspond in the future to help us with orientation to meet some of these challenges? And that's to you specifically, Brandi.
Yeah. Will they be able to access the PowerPoint?
Yes, we will have a copy of the PowerPoint on our statewide webinar page later today.
Okay. I thought my email address was on there, but it's not. Is there any way can I just type that in and give that to them?
Yes.
Brandi, I just posted it for you in the chat box.
You did? Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, well, I don't see any more questions.
I'm going to take dinner lights back from you. Thank you so much, Brandi. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me to participate.
Thank you, Brandi.
And we're going to wrap this recording. Go ahead, Megan.
There you go. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you got a lot of good knowledge from our speakers. Our information is on this last page. You can reach me or Christina, either one, at the information listed, and then you can access our statewide webinars at the site or join us on Facebook. And we do appreciate you guys coming today, and we hope you will join us for our next webinar, which is Tuesday, August 14th. We are presenting on the highly anticipated and requested topic of dyslexia with Stephen Alleman from Disability Rights Texas. So that will be at 12:15 on Tuesday. We hope to see you then.